If you guys have a back end first round rookie pick, this is the place for you. We're going to be breaking down today what to do with every first round rookie pick from pick 109 to 112, putting a button on this series. We did 101 to 104 already. We did 105 to 108 already. The first half of this video will be Superflex. The second half, one quarterback. Felt like it was a little confusing jumping around the last two videos, so this one should be a little bit easier to follow. But rest assured, if you guys hold 109 to 112, we should be able to give you guys good advice, whether you're trying to trade up, trade down, trade for a veteran, keep the pick, what prospects we're looking at that area of the draft. But without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so the structure of this video today, we're going to be breaking down Superflex strategy. If you have picks 109, 110, 111, 112, any pick in that range, we're talking about a relatively same tier of players. We're going to go through the prospects we have ranked there. So if you end up keeping the pick, again, pre-draft, this is going to change a lot once we get landing spots and draft capital, these guys. But just to keep in mind the types of prospects, the positions that'll be strong there pre-draft. Then we'll break down kind of trade up strategy, especially for those of you guys that are contenders. You might be looking to secure a high-end asset. Rebuilders probably might be looking to trade down from that pick. And then also we'll talk about some veterans that you could go and buy with that pick. So let's start it off with if you keep the pick. So who do we have ranked in that 109 to 112 range? We assume pretty comfortably that the top 7 overall prospects should be off the board. Of course, it goes without saying that if they are not, then they would be a great value there. But that means Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, and Brock Bowers should be off the board. So this 109 to 112 tier really starts with the guys that I have listed here, and then we'll talk about yours as well, Danny. Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr. If you need a quarterback, J.J. McCarthy should be available in that range. Ladd McConkey, and then Trey Benson or whoever ends up being RB1 starts to factor in this area of the draft. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on this 109 to 112 range? For me, it's like kind of pick your poison. Do you need more wide receivers on your team? Do you need a quarterback potentially if McCarthy falls? Or do you want to, fill out another running back slot on your roster?
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback debate is obviously going to be a tough one if McCarthy finds his way into the 108 range, which I do think will end up being the case after the NFL draft. If he goes top 10, that he will be valued amongst the top 8. But for the ease sake, let's just say whether it's Brian Thomas going 8th overall or JJ McCarthy, at that point, you're kind of evaluating it with, you can have your pick of wide receivers, but you can also have your pick of RB1 in this range, assuming a guy like Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, goes in the top 50 of the NFL draft, goes to a proper landing spot where they can command volume right away. I think they're worthwhile late first round picks on the current market. I do think that RB1 should find his way still at the back end of the first round, because at the end of the day, like we know with the nature of the running back position, although this is not the heralded class that we saw last year with your Bijan, with your Jahmyr Gibbs, if RB1 goes top 50 to a team that needs a ball carrier right away, they can threaten for top 15 level running back status as soon as year 1 in redraft.
Yeah, not to mention the dynasty landscape of the running back position. I mean, we have Rashad White, Kenneth Walker types inside our top 10 dynasty running backs. Like it won't take long. If Trey Benson goes, 50th to the Texans or something, he might be a top 10 dynasty running back before he even plays a snap. So even though the wide receiver position is what the college football landscape gave us in terms of a strong class, if a running back goes high, they're going to command dynasty value because the nature of that position is such that there's pretty much nobody out there with a long-term 2 or 3 year, 4 year projectable window of RB1 or RB2 value. And the second one of these guys actually gets involved into that top 50, top 64 overall picks of the actual NFL draft, it's possible that they slide their way right inside the top 10, top 12 dynasty running backs. So yeah, when you keep the pick, again, you have a number of different options. I would say default, it's good to assume that you're going to be looking at good wide receivers at that point in time, whether it's Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey. Again, it doesn't really matter who you have ranked here. It could be Troy Franklin. It could be Xavier Legette. It could be Keon Coleman. It could be, whatever guy you like in this area. For us, this second tier of wide receivers for me is Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, and Ladd McConkey. For Danny, it's more Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell. Mitchell factors into there as well. Again, it's all going to depend on where these guys go in the NFL draft, what round they go in, and what team they get drafted to, because they're all relatively similar prospects.
Yeah, and what you'll notice is that the 109 to 112 range is the most varied range across multiple creators. Like you can go to one guy, his 109 to 112 is going to look completely different than ours. Ours is going to look completely different than somebody else's, because at the end of the day, once you hit the 109 in this draft class in particular, the 109 to really the 205, the 206 area in this draft, especially pre-NFL draft, is really muddy. Now, a lot is going to come to fruition in the NFL draft. Guys are going to go higher than we expect. Guys are going to go lower than we expect. Guys are going to hit the nuts landing spots. Guys are going to hit bad landing spots. And that's ultimately going to be easier to dissect through that range of players once we kind of see where they land and how high they land. But as of right now, from just a prospect tier perspective, you can make the case for 10 to 12 guys being in the first round of the draft. It's really a truly special class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if McCarthy goes in round one, maybe even Nix or Penix goes in round one, we also get, great 6-7 wide receivers in the first round. We get a second or a third round running back. This class these 109 to 112 picks probably gained a lot of value at the NFL scouting combine, given how well some of these guys tested. Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and all these dudes, they probably gained value, at least in the eyes of your league mates. Did they actually get better as prospects? That's up for debate. But in the eyes of your league mates, these picks probably got more valuable, given how good the wide receiver class was thought of going into it and how well it lived up to expectations at the NFL scouting combine. So that's something to keep in mind. If you guys have this 109 to 112 range, you're probably a little happier this week than you were a couple of weeks ago with that pick. Nonetheless, some of you guys might be looking to trade up. I think this is going to be a very popular question. People are going to ask us, they have 110 in their rookie draft. They have 112 in their rookie draft. Hey, what should I be looking to pay to trade up inside that top 7 or to trade up inside that top 5 because I need a quarterback to trade up, get the nuts, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison at 101, 102. I will say, if you're a contender, I'm more okay doing this, or a house money team or something like that. If you're a rebuilder, generally speaking, trading up in a rookie draft is something that you probably don't want to be doing, because if you're a long-term rebuilder or took over an orphan or something like that, you need volume of assets. You need to be able to hit on those picks because you need a lot of things. You need a whole wide receiver core, a lot of running backs, a lot of maybe quarterbacks, a couple tight ends or whatever. With contenders, it's like your team might already be set. You might have finished 110 because you just missed the championship round, and you're looking to get another hammer at wide receiver. You're looking to get a third quarterback, or you're looking to get Brock Bowers to anchor your tight end core.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, trading up, the concept of it is you're trading into certainty. And the person you're trading for or trading with knows, hey, he's making this trade because he's unsure about the projection at the next level of these guys in the 109 to 112 range. And he feels a lot more certainty of the guys going in the top 6. That's when you typically see people try to tax, people try to say, hey, listen, like, this is the cost, but because you're moving up for this staple asset, give me a second on top. Like, those are the type of deals we see in rookie draft classes, hence why people always refer to it as, oh, you're just caught up with rookie fever, because we see that every year. People see the top prospects, people want to trade up for them. You have to make sure your team's in proper position and telling you that you're able to make that trade up. Because like you said, if your team's in shambles and you're trying to make a move up for Caleb Williams, guess what, man? You are not in position to make that move for Caleb Williams. You need to trust your own ability at that point. Say, hey, listen, from a value standpoint, my roster is not where it should be at this point. If I trade up into certainty, I have less shots to be able to recoup the value that I lost comparative to the other teams in my league.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really all going to depend where your team is at. Again, sometimes deals fall into your lap, and whether you're a rebuilder, contender, or an orphan, you should take it. But at the same time, generally speaking, if you're a contender, you probably have one of these picks anyway, because it's your own pick from 2024. And you might be looking to try and move up the board. And below, you guys are going to see some deals if you're just trying to get up a little bit into that 106, 107 range for maybe a Romo Dunze to add an additional wide receiver to your team, or maybe you don't have a valid tight end right now and you want to get Brock Bowers. Clam Cook tweeted this at us. This is an example of moving up from 109 to 106. All he had to give up really was the 205. He gets the 409 in return. I think this is a very easy deal. And the person at 106 making this trade understands that they might need more shots at the apple, more bites at the apple, and they get 109 and 205. Maybe they don't view Romo Dunze much better than the rest of the wide receiver class or whatever. So this is a pretty bog standard move up from 109 to 106 in the case of the contender here, probably going up for Odunze or Bowers.
Yeah, and this kind of reminds me too, when you guys are in your startups, second round liquidity is very easy to attain. Like just moving down a couple picks, securing a bunch of these future seconds, because sometimes you have deals afforded to you like this where you have to give up one of those twos along with your 109. Again, as much as I love the 109 this year, whether that's a Brian Thomas, JJ McCarthy, according to my rankings, there's still a pretty significant difference from the 109 to the 106. If that 205 was just a second round pick you acquired from moving down from, I don't know, the 603 to the 609 in your startup draft, like you're going to be loving it moving forward, because the difference in startup equivalent value from the 109 to the 106 is probably going to be at least 2 rounds.
Yeah, and you might have, like, this year, I have the 205 in one league because I sold A.J. Dillon and Josh Kelly during the season. Like, you might have acquired that second-round pick during the year. selling off on Zach Moss or selling off on, a guy that was giving somebody production. So yeah, collecting second round picks, always a good idea for this reason. Another trade here from this rookie draft here, trades away the 109 and the 210 for the 107. Again, pretty similar deal where you're giving up a first and a second, getting up a couple picks at 107. You're guaranteed one of those top 7 assets. Maybe specifically he's looking for Brock Bowers, or maybe specifically he's looking to get JJ McCarthy potentially, and he wants a quarterback and he wants to secure McCarthy, because I do think once the draft capital comes in, and especially if he goes to like the Vikings or something like that, McCarthy might push himself up into that top 7 tier, making it a top 8 tier, and he could go as high as 106, 107 in a lot of people's leagues. So a couple example trades that I pulled from our trade finder over on Flock Fantasy of going up even higher. If you want to go up to 104, 105 from 109 to 112, this is an example trade. Say your team's in a position, you have so many wide receivers. You move off of DK Metcalf in the 112, you go up and get the 105 and 305 because you want to secure Drake May, or you want to secure Jaden Daniels, or you want Malik Neighbors or something like that. Again, when you're a contender, when you have a really good roster, you can afford to make deals like this. If you're a rebuilder or an orphan, you probably can't afford to make deals like this. But at face value, I think given team situation, this is a great deal.
I love this type of move as a contender. Basically, you're looking at it as, well, 112, I'm going to get a non-consequential asset. Like, especially if it's a start 10 league, start 9 league. The 112 is not really giving you a needle moving starting overall player. Like, let's just be frank. In multiple draft classes, as much as this is a deeper, better draft class, like anytime you can hit on a starting lineup caliber player at the 112 in a shorter lineup league, that's already a dub. So taking your DK Metcalf, who, I mean, he's a wide receiver 2-3 archetype in Dynasty. He's not really going to kill you if you lose out on him, to move up and secure, like you said, whether that's quarterback liquidity with a guy like Drake May or a guy like Jaden Daniels at that spot, or whether that's even Malik Neighbors. Like, yes, DK Metcalf is a very good wide receiver asset, but Malik Neighbors with a good rookie season, maybe even a good second season, has the opportunity to be valued within the top 3 to 5 Dynasty wide receivers on the landscape. So taking 2 assets that don't really have that type of ascension appreciation value and consolidating down to a guy like Malik Neighbors, again, if you are a contender, this is a great move. Now, if you're a rebuilder, maybe your best interest is saying, what can DK Metcalf get me on the market in terms of picks? What can 112 get me? Can I parlay that into a 2025 one? That's the structure of deals you should be making when you're a rebuilder. When you're a contender, you can more so go out and buy these appreciating assets like the 105 represents. So I think this is a very sharp deal.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're trying to consolidate. Maybe you hit on Tank Dell and Puka Nacua last year, and suddenly DK Metcalf is the wide receiver 5 on your roster when he was the wide receiver 3 entering the year. And you're like, hey, I got so many wide receivers here. I can afford to take 112 and DK Metcalf, go up and get a third quarterback, or go up and get a better wide receiver like Malik Neighbors, or maybe it's a high tight end premium and you want to get Bowers at that 105 or something like that. So great move. Again, maybe you want to go all the way up to 101 or 102. And again, I would really, really discourage rebuilders from trying to do this. I know it's tempting. You want Caleb Williams, you want Marvin Harrison Jr. If you're not in a position to compete, you don't have the luxury of giving up multiple assets to go up to 101. With that being said, this is the type of deal that probably any team should make because it's just a great deal for the 101. But generally speaking, buying the 101, 102 in general is reserved for people who have a lot of assets, is reserved for people who have the luxury of being able to consolidate. But again, 104, 111, and Khalil Shakir were traded away to get pick 101, assuming, that's Caleb Williams. It says it's a 2-quarterback league, so it probably is Caleb Williams. Again, that's a great move in general. But if you're in a position where you're a contender, like I have a house money team right now where I have 3 first-round picks this year, 108, 105, and 111 or something like that. That's the type of deal that I could make because my team's already really good. And I additionally, I have 3 first-round picks. So if I want to take 2 first-round picks, go after Marvin, go after Caleb Williams, it makes sense at that point. So if you're a contender looking to trade up and this is the type of team situation, you have a number of first-round picks and your team's already good, you can make moves like this as well.
Yeah, and right off the bat, there's a difference when we say, you're in a rebuilding position. We don't necessarily mean, you got the first pick this past year because you have a bunch of future picks and ascending talent moving forward, and maybe you lost some players. That's not what we're referring to. When we say, like, you shouldn't be making some of these moves as a rebuilder, we're more so saying, like, hey, like, the cabinets are freaking barren, man. You haven't done your groceries. There's no food in the house. Your kids are starving. Like, you should not be going out and buying a Mercedes at that certain point. That's kind of what it happens when you're a rebuilder, man. Like, when you're struggling to make ends meet, man, don't go out and buy the luxury item that is a Caleb Williams, that is a Marvin Harrison Jr., because you have way more to worry about in terms of building the foundation, building the structure of your lifestyle, aka of your fantasy team.
Yeah, the goal, obviously, when you're a rebuilder is just secure those picks naturally because your own
Yeah.
first is bad. But yeah, I think a lot of the times people get caught up in the shiny toy and they want to go get it. And it's like, yeah, I understand. Caleb Williams is great. Marvin's great, but you need volume of picks when you're a rebuilder. And speaking of rebuilders, this is what you should be doing instead. So if you guys are a rebuilding team in this area of the draft, 109 to 112, this is a great time to work the board and move down or move into future draft capital as well. If your goal is to collect picks, if your goal is to collect future assets, because let's say your roster has one good quarterback, two good wide receivers, and nothing else but draft picks on it, you can make simple deals like this one from DJ Shaheen. Very simple, straightforward deal. Superflex League, he sells the 112 for a future first in 2025. It's likely a playoff team's first, but worst case scenario, that's 112 in next year's class. If that guy wins the championship, it's 112 in next year's class, and you haven't really lost anything. You net a future first. That's going to have some good liquidity. Ideally, of course, you collect more than just a future first. You get a first and a second for it or something like that. But best case scenario, that first is from a likely playoff team, ends up being the 106 or it ends up being the 108. And suddenly you got a much better asset for your 112.
On top of all that, when you're in a position where the 112 player who's going to give you production in year one can get off of your team, especially when you're playing the rebuilding game or when you're playing the house money game and you're trying to tank for the 101 in a certain class, the more picks you can parlay into future liquidity, opens you up to more opportunity to make deals in season, whether that's like, oh, Justin Jefferson is out for the next 6 weeks. Let me go take this projected late 2025 one and my Garrett Wilson and try to make an offer for him. Like those type of deals could arise for you where you can get players for 80 cents on the dollar because you don't have to rely upon that production. And all that cost you in this instance was the 112, whether that's a Ladd McConkey, whether that's a Troy Franklin, maybe RB1 in this class. You're taking the asset that would give you points right now, and instead you're parlaying it into future value, A, to get the production off your team, and B, to open you up to more trade opportunities in the future. Because when your rookie draft comes and the 112 is needed to make a pick, you unfortunately need to make a player at that pick. The 2025 first, however, you have a full year of extending that decision out. So the value of that pick in terms of the uncertainty factor remains.
Yeah, absolutely. It's to go back to the example that you made with groceries, it's like meal planning. It's like you have all your meals set up in the future. It's like when you're eating. You're going to get a lot of picks in 2025, and you also have the upside that pick becomes earlier than you expected. Maybe the class is better than we expect right now because a bunch of quarterbacks emerge, or the running back class is just generational or something like that. So that's always a relatively good move. Again, I will say that this class is pretty deep, so more so than other years, selling your late first-round pick for a future 2025 first might not be the best deal unless you're getting, say, a 2025 first and second back in return. Especially if it's like 109 that you're selling, you probably want to insulate a little bit more than just pick swap for pick swap or whatever. So you can also trade down too. I think this year is the year that I'm looking more so to trade down rather than trading into future classes. Like, let's say you could sell your 110 in this example that you guys can see from our trade finder for the 204 and the 205. The player you're getting at 110 is good, and they're probably going to be slightly better than the player you're getting at 204, 205. But especially if your cupboards are empty and you need a lot of players on your roster, you add 2 players to your team. You add, instead of, say, Ladd McConkey at 110, you get Troy Franklin and Keon Coleman at 204 and 205. Or you get Jonathan Brooks and, whatever. Bo Nix gets early second round capital and you add him to it. You're adding 2 players instead of 1 player. So you're at a point basically where you're filling up on volume of assets as opposed to, low volume of assets. Of course, if you have any specific trade questions, you can drop them in the comments. But generally speaking, this year, mid-second round picks are going to be almost as valuable as late second round picks anyway. So if you can move down from 110, 111, 112 and pick up the 202 and the 207 or the 204 and the 205, that's definitely a sharp move that you can do, especially in Superflex formats.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we always talk about the frame of, if you want to consolidate versus if you want to break it down. If you're a rebuilder and you need to take that 110 asset and instead have 2 dart throws at potentially a very, very talented class, you should do it. The 204 and the 205, like you just said, if the 110 is, I don't know, Ladd McConkey, or maybe that's RB1 off the board because a contender has a couple seconds and just wants to ensure that they get Trey Benson. Say 110 is the Trey Benson. Then at that point, 204, 205, you could be looking whether that's Bo Nix ends up getting good capital, whether that's Keon Coleman, whether that's, Xavier Worthy's probably going to go higher because he ran fast, but that's about my ranking. So whether that's, I don't know, in some Leggett. Like there's so many names.
right?
Brooks, right? Like there's so many names that could find their way into that 204, 205 range. So if you hit on two of those players that, like Corey said, pretty much project relatively favorably to the 110 asset already, that's going to put you in a good spot. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, last year, if you traded away the 110, that might have been like Zach Charbonnet, Devon Achane or something. You might have walked away with
Yeah.
Sam Laporta and Rashee Rice as a result of that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's giving your, and again, those are hits, obviously. You could have missed on those picks, but that's our point. If you trust your ability to draft, having more bites at the apple is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Like the high end assets, if you don't trust your ability to draft, are safer. But if you do, or you trust our ability to evaluate the prospects and relay that information, then this can be a very valuable strategy in building up a great roster. So the other thing that you can do, and then we'll move on to the one quarterback position, is if you have 109 to 112, there's a very good chance that's your pick and your contender and you're trying to win. So one thing that I also think is a very viable strategy this year is buying a veteran player. At this point in time, maybe you don't want to do it right now because, you know, these picks are still going to gain a little bit of value as we get closer to rookie drafts, or maybe you want to wait until after the NFL draft to make a move like this. But on the screen right now, you guys can see screenshots from our Dynasty trade value chart. And these are the guys that we have rated in this 109 to 112 area. Of course, ideally, you get somebody better than the guys that we have rated in the 109 to 112 area. Like you can see the wide receivers on the board, Tyreek, Ayuk, London, all those guys. They're valued as 106 to 107 type of guys. But more realistically, you're looking at these Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, Michael Pittman Jr., T. Higgins type of guys. Pittman Jr., I mean, as we're recording this, just signed an extension today. If you're a contending team and you have the 110 and you can get Michael Pittman Jr. for the 110 right now, that's a very good deal. Maybe he's going to be your wide receiver 3 going forward, or maybe you need a running back. Again, I caution you, it's March. You don't need anything right now, but if you can get a good value on somebody like Jonathan Taylor or Devon Achane or Travis Etienne, because there's some Tank Bigsby news right now, that makes some sense. Maybe you want to go after a quarterback. Maybe you need a second quarterback or a third quarterback. You want to go after and buy low on Bryce Young or buy low on Tua Tagovailoa because, you know, there's stuff swirling about him. Maybe you want to go and secure yourself a lockdown tight end and buy low on Mark Andrews or buy low on TJ Hawkinson or something like that. You can absolutely do that. Maybe you want to get ahead of a Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta Falcons signing and you want to buy low on Kyle Pitts with your 111 or something like that. So again, veteran trade targets also very viable this time of year. Just be careful that you're not doing it just to fill out your starting lineup to feel good and sleep at night. Do it because you're actually getting a good value on the player and match up startup value to where that guy's going, right? If you're 111, you're like, okay, I'm going to take Ladd McConkey if I keep this pick or something, like somebody in that range. Ladd McConkey, let's look at his startup value. He's going to be like a 6th, 7th round startup pick. I can get, say, on the board available for you right now is Drake London because people are not high on him. They're not high on the Atlanta Falcons. You look at Drake London's startup value, it's way higher than Ladd McConkey's. Even if you had to add a little plus, you'd be okay doing something like that. So again, that's how you want to strategically trade for veteran trade targets right now. You don't want to just be like, okay, who do they have rated as a 109 to 112 player? Just trade for that guy. It's like, it's more complex than that. Think about the range of outcomes.
Well, the other thing too, I'm fine if you're paying sticker price, but not like you have to make sure you're articulate with the asset that you're buying for sticker price. If you're buying like a complete like Tyreek Hill type for sticker price, maybe I want a little discount for buying that right now in April or early May when the buying window happens. If you're buying like a Kyle Pitts, who you think has the ascension opportunity to get back to top 3 to 5 tight end, I'm much more willing to pay sticker price on an asset like Kyle Pitts or an asset like Drake London than I am on a guy like Tyreek Hill right now. Like if I'm buying like a true win now vet, I would rather wait later in the offseason, or if you can make it at the rookie draft, because obviously, you know, the 112, you can't just carry it to later in the offseason. Can you get a little bit of value on it instead of having to pay the 105 for a guy like Tyreek Hill? Will it cost 109 maybe in a mid-second? Will it cost like 109 and maybe a roster player? Like I would try to navigate trades in that way where I'm not giving up consequential assets if I'm going to be buying a stud like a guy like Tyreek Hill, 30-year-old wide receiver.
Yeah, especially if it's a contending piece. Strictly, I'm going to put this guy in my lineup on Sundays, and he's going to get me a lot of points. You're better off probably waiting until around the rookie draft to actually make that move. But again, selling and buying windows arise all the time. Maybe Travis Etienne by that time is not available for the price he's available for now, and that's why you want to make the move now. Sell your 110 for Travis Etienne because, you know, let's say by July and August, we're not worried about Tank Bigsby anymore, and he's no longer worth that price. And of course, you probably wouldn't have that pick anymore. So again, just keep in mind what the market value is. Keep in mind the buying windows. We can move on to the one quarterback strategy. Again, it's going to be relatively similar, so this part should take a little bit less time. The thing that's going to differ here is the players that we're actually willing to take in the one quarterback area. For me, and in one quarterback leagues, I'm going to assume that like most of the top 4 assets are definitely off the board. Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Romo Dunze, and Brock Bowers. I would also assume that like the top of the tier 2 wide receivers would be gone as well, because I mean, you got 5 or 6 picks. After those guys, you're going to have maybe Worthy goes off the board because he goes to Kansas City. Maybe Brian Thomas goes in the first round of Buffalo. He's off the board. Maybe Caleb Williams is off the board as well. For me, you're looking at kind of the back end of the tier 2 wide receivers. So for me, that's like Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell, whatever wide receivers you value in that area, Xavier Legette, Troy Franklin, whatever. And then the top of the running back board, again, is going to come into the equation as well. Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Wright for us. And then also maybe those second quarterbacks, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, coming into fruition there. So it really all depends where your team is at. Again, the one quarterback strategy differs a little bit because there's only 4 really solid lockdown assets. And then 5, 6, 7, 8 overall rookie picks are probably going to be a mismatch of whoever gets the best draft capital, the best landing spots among those wide receivers, and maybe one of the running backs as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like, for example, I mean, mine, you mentioned yours. I got guys like Ladd McConkey, Drake May, Adonai Mitchell, Jaden Daniels, Troy Franklin, Jonathan Brooks in that 8 to 13 tier. And like you said, if you need a quarterback, you take the quarterback. You need a running back, you take the running back. You need a wide receiver, you take the wide receiver, especially in a one quarterback league where it's a lot less like, oh, like this quarterback sliding because it's a super flex. I should take him. It's like in a one quarterback league, like the boards are pretty simple. Like people are going to take what they need, but people are also going to be smart and keep a hold of ADP simply because the options in a one quarterback compared to a super flex aren't going to be as bountiful.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about it in a second, but these picks, I'm actually even more likely to trade for veterans if I'm a contender. But talking about trade up strategy, again, in a one quarterback league, for contenders, the strategy of where you're trying to get to changes, right? It was a top 7 tier in Superflex. It's a top 4 tier in a one quarterback league. You're trying to get Marvin, Neighbors, Bowers, or Odunze, most likely. Maybe you're a huge Brian Thomas fan or huge Worthy fan, and 105 is that range that you're looking for. In any case, it's going to cost you quite a bit coming from where you are right now, 109 to 112, to get up to, say, 102 for Malik Neighbors or 104 for one of the guys that falls to you there. Alex sent us this trade, one quarterback, half PPR league. Somehow he pulled off highway robbery and sold the 111 and the 112 for the 102. Again, anytime you can make a trade like this and get Malik Neighbors out of it, you definitely do it. The point is, you're going to have to give up probably multiple first round picks. You're going to have to do it. And, he said he held the 107 as well. There was no way if I was that guy selling the 102, I would have let him hold on to that 107. I would have said, you at least have to offer me 107 and 111. And even then I still wouldn't do it. But 107 and 111 would have been at least a little bit closer, a little bit more realistic to some of the deals that are going to go down in people's leagues.
Yeah, you rinsed your hands with him on this deal. Like, Jesus Christ, 111 and the 112 for the 102. Like, go celebrate your Malik Neighbors at that point, because 111 and 112 in a one quarterback league. Like we just mentioned, like, oh, like if you could trade 110 into the 204, the 205 in a super flex, you should do it. The 111 and the 112 is like trading the 102 for the 204, 205 in a super flex. Sorry, I worded that wrong.
Exactly. Like the quarterbacks are going to lose all that value. So, I mean, any one of those, that Malik Neighbors is going to be literally a first round asset in a startup. Like you got a first round asset for probably like 4th and 5th, maybe round assets, like 6th, 7th round potentially assets.
Yeah.
So great move, obviously. Again, more so the deals that you're going to look at is maybe you have the 111 and you also own the 106 and you could do the 106 and the 111 for the 102. That makes a little bit more sense, a little bit more fair for the other person. And it actually has a chance of being accepted. So again, Alex, great job on your fleece, but most likely those are the deals that are not going to be available. So again, contenders, if you're looking to get up from 109 to 112 for one of these top 4 assets, it's going to cost you a pretty penny in most cases. If you're a rebuilder and you're looking to trade down, again, it's similar to what we said about Superflex. In a one quarterback format, you got to remember that picks become slightly less valuable, but moves like these make a ton of sense. If you guys can see this move from Toronto Dave here, if you have a late pick and you want to punt it to next year for a pick that has an upside of being earlier, that's definitely fair. He sells his 112, his 308. Again, it's one quarterback 308 and 2025 third in exchange for John Mechie, who, I mean, Toronto Dave's from, Canada. I'm sure he's just taking a shot on a Canadian, and 2025 first round pick. Again, we don't know where that pick's going to end up being, but again, even if it's mid to late, yet again, like his current pick, you sold the 112. So it's not really that much skin off of your back. So again, keep in mind that this class is pretty deep. So that 112 might be better this year than it would be next year, but you do have the upside of getting a better pick than 112 next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a sharp deal, especially like you mentioned, if that first projects into the mid, like you lost the third and the 308, like nobody really cares. So those are non-consequential picks. And I'm assuming if you're making this move, the 2025 one probably projects more favorably than maybe finishing as the 2025 112. So I like this deal.
Yeah, and these are just kind of general strategy tips that we're talking about here. That could apply to any year. Selling for a future first in a one quarterback league with a late pick is fine. One thing I would definitely entertain, as I talked about with Superflex leagues, is getting 2 early seconds in 2024, because I do believe that this class goes 15 or 20 prospects deep that I feel very, very confident in. And it's a mess of those tier 2 and 3 wide receivers, like we already talked about. You know, Thomas and those guys are probably going to be gone, but you're still going to have a chance probably at the end of the first round, early second round, to get your Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, maybe Troy Franklin falls at that point, maybe your tier 2 running backs or tier 1 running backs even. And then also, you know, Jatavian Sanders and any other quarterbacks that get high draft capital are going to factor in as well. There's not a ton separating these assets in startups. So if you're a rebuilder and your team, as we talked about, needs a shit ton of help because your team is in horrible shambles and you have the 111 in your one quarterback league and you trust your ability to draft a good player at, say, 202 if you trade down and 205 if you trade down, then these are always smart moves to make. Because as I talked about already, the 110 in a one quarterback league might have been Zach Charbonnet last year, and you might have traded down to 202 and 207 and taken Rashee Rice and Jaden Reed, and now suddenly you're in a really good spot. And again, those are hits versus a miss, or somewhat of a miss that I'm outlining, but that's what's possible if you trust your ability to draft.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That I mean, we saw it last year. I would say this this class as a whole is either as talented, if not even more talented, than what we saw last year. Like we evidenced in the rookie cycle, we're saying that, oh, once you hit a certain point, like this draft isn't as deep. Like this year, man, like we're going completely deep with draftable players. Like we can see a record of day 2 caliber wide receivers getting picked. So it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, maybe this class ends up disappointing and last year's class ends up overperforming, but that's the risk you're taking with rookie picks in general. If you spend them, they become players. It's like they're still assets until you spend them. And even if you collect 202 and 207 and you don't end up spending those picks and you trade them for veterans or whatever you do with them, that's something that you have to factor in as well. So last part of this video is, again, veteran trade strategy. What types of players in a one quarterback league, if you're a contender, which is probably a lot of you since this is a late first, can you get, right? Maybe you could go out like Eric did. I guess he ended up doing the opposite part of this trade, but the guy that traded for Kenneth Walker in this trade got him for 111 and Cole Kmet, which again, I think is pretty reasonable. Yeah. If you need another running back for your roster, you trade away 111, might end up being RB2 in the class, might end up being wide receiver 6 or 7 in the class. I think that's definitely fair. We have listed here, if you need a quarterback, you could go after any one of these guys. Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray should be attainable for a late first rounder and a one quarterback. If you need a running back, some of these guys might be attainable. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook, Javonte Williams, or Ramondre Stevenson. At wide receiver, again, similar names. Probably not the top of this, like Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, Michael Pittman, probably not available. George more Pickens. So the later guys, George Pickens, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, Josh Downs, those type of guys, Jaden Reed, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley. Again, if you're buying a pure production piece, like say you want to go buy Devontae Adams, if you're buying him on the basis that he's going to be worth more, that's fine because he could accumulate value if the Raiders add a big time quarterback. But if you're just buying him because you want production, you're probably better off waiting until May, June when your actual rookie draft takes place. And then a tight end, again, you could always probably grab a Dalton Kincaid, a Kyle Pitts, a George Kittle, a David Njoku with a late first rounder as well. So any other thoughts, or can we wrap this thing up?
I think we could pretty much wrap it up. Again, if you guys are picking at the 109 to the 112, assuming it's your own pick, that you're going to be in a contending window for the most part. Again, we outlined whether you're a rebuilder, maybe you accumulated a bunch of these picks. But if you're a contender, man, like the goal that you should take from this video is if there is a deal worth making, listen to it, because whether that's trading down to the 204 plus the 205, whether that's trading it for a vet, deals will arise as people get their guys in this class, whether that's, targeting a guy like Troy Franklin or targeting a guy like Xavier Legette. Like people are going to start having their guys. And if you view it as a relatively large share, like we said, between 109 and like 206, 207, you can capitalize on some value here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like people are gonna see their guy is maybe Xavier Legette and he's available at 203, and they're gonna trade their future first for 203. Because in
Yeah,
their mind, Xavier Legette's a first round
it's worth
caliber
it.
player in this class, and they're like, I'm fine giving up my mid to late projected first, and then all of a sudden that first became 105, and they just
Yeah.
traded 105 for a projected mid second round pick, and maybe he doesn't even hit on top of that. So that's what can go wrong if you're just buying your guys. So again, work the board. Don't try and outsmart the market. Try and exploit the market. If the market believes a certain thing, this is a high end tier of wide receivers at 109 and 112, and you don't view it that way, then trade down into the mid second round or trade into future capital or trade those picks for veterans. Because if that's the case, and everybody's caught up on the athleticism of Brian Thomas and Adonai Mitchell and all these guys, you could probably get a damn good veteran in return for them if you're not as high on those players. So again, this video was totally strategic. It wasn't really micro player takey, but if you did enjoy it, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We showed off a lot of site features today on this video. Our trade value chart, as you guys saw, we have consensus values between me and Danny for, one quarterback leagues, super flex leagues, future rookie pick values. So if you're wondering 2025 and 2026 capital, we also showed off our trade finder, which is available in the Flock Fantasy trade calculator. And of course, when you sign up over on Flock Fantasy, you'll get a 7-day free trial when you use promo code FSE to see all the value that's on the site. You can see the trade calculator. You can see our rankings, our prospect rankings. Our Dynasty draft guide is coming out in a couple days. Second edition will have 50 prospects instead of the 30 like our first edition had. So all of that is available in the link down below in the pinned comment and in the description. 30% off using promo code FSE, 6 months for free when you sign up annually. Definitely going to want to do that because we have so many cool projects coming as the off season goes along. By the time you have to renew a year from now, you're not even going to recognize the site that you signed up for. It's going to be that much better. So really interested to see what you guys think of this video. Leave any feedback down below. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.